Welcome to A News, everyone. I'm Anita Sharma. Global superpowers are intent to retain their status amid the current shakeup in the geopolitical sphere, as the United States shows a clear willingness to not only embrace but deliver on seemingly every Russian demand. China is watching very closely to see how all of this unfolds. Joining me to discuss this is former diplomat and Spanish ambassador Gustavo de Aristegui from Rabat, Morocco, as well as Alexandra Filipenko, a political analyst joining us from Vilnius, Lithuania. Good day to you both.
Good day to you.
Thank you.
Good day. Greetings.
Alexandra, let's start with you. What does it mean for China if, in fact, the United States continues to work with Russia to try to find an end to the Ukraine war?
It looks like for President Trump, China-Russia relations have been one of the biggest concerns. And generally, President Trump wants to counter China in every sphere, in the diplomatic sphere, in financial sphere, et cetera, et cetera. So now Washington sees potential China-Russia relations or strengthening of those relations as a threat. So now we see that for China also the rising, maybe at least the not good relations between Russia and the U.S. Of course, we cannot say it like that yet, but still better relations between Moscow and Washington can be a bit worrisome, because now we see how China became the main partner of Russia, the main trading partner of Russia. So probably China would not want to lose this market, of course, and so this would mean less influence of China in Russia, and China might need Russia also for the Arctic trade path.
Okay, a lot to uncover and discuss there. Ambassador de Aristegui, your thoughts, sir?
Yes, much has been said about the apparent coordination between the Chinese regime and Russia. It is true that for a long time they have had a coincidence of adversaries and opponents. They have competed against the West for different reasons. In the case of China, it has been a much more subtle, much more generalized war, a war that includes many different aspects. It includes, of course, investment, trade, cyber attacks, gray war, even what is called the hybrid wars. It is a problem of global domination and global outreach, but there is an underlying problem that very, very few people are able to understand, to perceive. There is a fundamental challenge of China towards Russia. China does not consider Russia a global power. It has said that in many fora. Mm-hmm. It has said that in a very clear way. They believe that Russia is today a very weak economic power of merely $2.2 trillion of GDP. And of course, that is less than Italy and just a little more than Spain, just to put things in context, with a very mighty, on paper, military might. But this military might has been stopped on its tracks by a much weaker country, as is Ukraine, true, with the help of the West. But this has put Russia in the mirror of reality. You cannot be a global power with $2.2 trillion of economy. China knows that, and it has made that very clear. This was very humiliating for the Russians. And lastly, they share a huge land border that is the Siberian Chinese land border, and the growing number of Chinese residents in Siberia is a matter of deep concern for strategists in Moscow. They believe that in many ways China is trying to conquer by silent invasion Siberia. So the problem that we're going to face in maybe 10 years, a little less maybe, is probably that there is going to be some kind of clash between China and Russia. But today, they have coinciding interests, and those coinciding interests are the rivalry with the West and the need to have access to deep, free, and completely unopposed and uncontrolled international waters, which is not the case of the Russian fleets. As I have said sometimes in other media, the Black Sea Fleet is controlled by a Turkey, by a NATO member state, which is Turkey, and then going out of the Straits of Bosphorus and Dardanelles, you go into the territorial waters of Turkey, Greece, Italy, France, Spain. So it is completely controlled. Then you also have the Baltic fleet. The Baltic fleet, the Baltic Sea, is surrounded by members of NATO. Of 9 countries that have shores with the Baltic Sea, 8 are members of NATO. So that, in many ways, inhabilitates the Russian fleet of the Baltic. And then finally, there is the Vladivostok Pacific Fleet, which is controlled by Japan, both through the north exit, which is Hokkaido, controlled by the Japanese Air Force and Navy, and then in the south, the joint control in Okinawa by the Americans and the Japanese. So, in fact, we have this strange mix of unbalanced geopolitical and geostrategic disequilibrium, which is the potential rivalry between China and Russia, but the present coordination can mean a lot of instability and insecurity for the world in the coming years.
All right, I want to pick up on a key point you made there, and Alexander, I'm going to point this question towards you, just off the cuff here. As the ambassador noted, he believes that Russia is not really being taken seriously right now by China, as you heard. So it begs a question from my end. With all the pundits saying the U.S. needs Russia, the U.S. needs Russia, it's being so conciliatory. Alexandra, does the U.S. need Russia? Or according to what the ambassador said, does Russia need the United States? And if Russia needs the United States, why is the U.S. being so conciliatory? Fair question?
Yeah, absolutely. For now, the U.S. needs Russia. Not the U.S. doesn't need Russia, of course. Only President Trump needs Russia to end the war and the invasion in Ukraine, Russia's full-scale invasion of 2022, or the war that started in 2014. So President Trump needs it only because he wants, of course, this to end. To, as some say, and I must say that even Michael Waltz said that, to get the Nobel Peace Prize, and Donald Trump should be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize if all wars end. That's the National Security Advisor to President Trump, Mike Waltz, said himself in a recent interview. So President Trump only wants to end the war. And as we've heard from the U.S. intelligence agencies, and as we understood from the area talks between the U.S. and Russian counterparts, we understand that Russia does not actually want to end the war. It doesn't seem that Russia is ready to actually end the war. That's what's been reported by the New York Times, and it's been said that Marco Rubio, the state secretary, expressed that opinion to behind closed doors to his partners in UK, France, Germany, and Italy. And so this sentiment, we've heard the sentiment that Russia doesn't want to end the war. So right now, President Trump only needs Russia for that. Of course, he does need Russia for economic purposes. Also, the other reason why he would need Russia in the future are strategic cooperation talks, only about the nuclear weapons. This is one of the talking points of President Trump. He wants new regulations on nuclear arms of nuclear powers, de facto and de jure also nuclear powers, because we understand there are more than 5 countries now obtaining nuclear weapons. So President Trump would need Russia for that, for those talks between China, Russia, and the U.S. But that's in the future. For now, he needs Russia only for one purpose: to end the war with Ukraine. And as we've heard from the U.S. intelligence agencies and from Marco Rubio, they're not sure that Russia really wants that.
I like that we're pivoting between the present and the future. You both are an ambassador to that point. Let's talk about the present, because right now it looks like the United States is being way too conciliatory towards Russia. If in fact that is the case, it seems to be the case, could China see this as an opportunity to be more aggressive with its initiatives? And I'm talking about Taiwan.
Well, this is exactly the point. You hit the nail on the head.
Thank you.
You see, if we go back to my previous comment, you see that one of the main problems of China is the access to deep water international seas. All of the continental platform of China, the 200 miles from the coast until the deep waters, are easily controllable by satellites and anti-submarine planes. All the submarines of China, the very large fleet that they are producing right now, is going to be very easily controlled. So the only way that they will have access to deep waters is by conquering Taiwan and building a naval base on the eastern coasts of the island. It's not just a matter of national pride. It's not just a matter of the one China policy. It's a matter of geostrategy. And there's a second thing, which we tend to forget that China's way of waging war is far more economic, technological, spying, gray wars, and hybrid wars than anything else. China is an export-driven economy. 80% of China's exports and imports, including energy, go through the Strait of Malacca. The Strait of Malacca is very easily blockable and controllable by countries that are not friendly to China, be it because they are adversaries or enemies of China, quite clearly, by choice of China, it must be said, or they are allies of the United States, or actually both, which is the case, for example, of Singapore or Thailand. So China is trying to retaliate in trying to control other key points of passage of world trade. This is the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb, by building a mega naval base in Djibouti because of the, let's call it, the problems that the French are facing in Africa. Mm-hmm. This is the same thing that was denounced by Marco Rubio in the Strait of Panama. And this is why the Americans are obsessed with Strait of Panama, because right now they have detected that the Chinese have the presence of companies that are state-owned in both ends of the Strait of Panama on both sides of the canal. So this means that they could very easily block it whenever they want. And this is going to be a trading chip to bargain. Yeah. If anyone around the Strait of Malacca would dare block their international trade. So right now what we have is the typical geographic imposition of geographic stubborn reality. Mm-hmm. And this geographic stubborn reality is what presides geopolitics and geoeconomics. This is the reason why the Chinese are going to try to coordinate with the Russians in many ways, to try to break this impasse, and to try to break this blockade, or the possible blockade in the future. And then again, let's not forget that the Chinese are building a phenomenal military power. Mm-hmm. The Chinese army, the Chinese People's Army, was a force of internal control and internal cohesion, if you want to call it some way. Today, it is a phenomenal force that can project itself almost anywhere on the planet, and can coordinate the expansive, aggressive policies of China, be it in Africa, Latin America, trying to dominate, for example, critical raw materials or rare earth, lithium, vanadium, titanium, or phosphates. Let's not forget that the world would not eat without phosphates. It would be impossible to feed 8 billion people without phosphates.
Correct.
So all of these sources are trying to be controlled by China. And right now they have mining agreements with some of the most important producers of lithium, which is the white gold, be it Bolivia, be it Argentina, be it Chile, be it Afghanistan, for example, or so many other countries that are even trying to take control of mining rights of lithium in Spain. Just imagine, which they will not be able to because of the European Union regulations and NATO regulations. But the fact of the matter is that there is a very aggressive, expansive policy of China going on for the last 20 years. If you look at what is happening in the South China Sea and the String of Pearls, the Chinese have been building a whole array of artificial islands that they are arming to the teeth with naval and air force bases. And they have multiplied many times fold their extraordinarily powerful Navy and their Coast Guard. And a lot of people don't see this as a menace, but actually the spearhead of the harassment that the Chinese are exerting in the South China Sea against, for example, the Philippines or Australia or many other countries that are neighbors of China is exactly their Coast Guard. So we need to monitor this extremely closely, because this can be the key of the future of the next 5 years in a geopolitical and a geostrategic sense.
Well, let's talk about the drills that took place today. We have Australia, the drills from China that took place in the Tasman Sea. You have Australia and New Zealand, Alexandra, essentially coming out and saying, hey, this caught us off guard. We usually get some type of notice, advance notice. This one surprised us. So here you have the theatrics playing out between Trump, not quite Putin yet, right? That meeting has not been firmed up as yet, but you have the theatrics between the Trump administration and Russia playing out. And now, just on this Saturday morning, you have China basically completing drills in the Tasman Sea. Your thoughts on that, Alexandra?
Well, I think that now China is taking up the strategy of Donald Trump, because Steve Bannon recently, in his interview in Wall Street Journal, reminded what Trump's strategy is, the flood the zone strategy. Steve Bannon was the architect of Trump's win 2016, and he really outlined how Trump's administration works right now. And it seems that the Trump's administration fell into the trap of a flood the zone theory, but where they did not expect it from China. Flood the zone is when you throw out so much information that the opponents cannot actually follow you thoroughly. So the Trump administration followed its own narratives so thoroughly, its own narratives in internal politics of the United States, foreign policies in Ukraine, Russia, Israel, talking about Canada and as the 51st state, talking about Greenland, talking about Panama Canal, et cetera, talking so much that they lost track of what actually China is doing. And Trump has many times said that China is actually the biggest threat to the United States on every front. So this is probably the trap that the Trump administration usually puts, and they fell into it right now on the part of China.
Oh, wow. Ambassador, do you think the U.S. fell into this trap with respect to the drills in the Tasman Sea by China?
Well, I fully agree with Dr. Filipenko. You see, the problem of being too concentrated on the next move is that you're losing perspective of the next game. And the next game in geopolitics and geostrategy is the South Pacific, it's Asia. Of course, the Americans are saying that it is their main priority today, but you cannot focus on the priority in Asia if you don't fix the European problem. And of course, for that, we need to step up. European powers need to step up. I mean, a country like Spain, my country, cannot seriously to be an international contender in defense if it's only spending 1.23% of its GDP in defense, which is the equivalent of $21 billion, the equivalent of one Gerald Ford class aircraft carrier plus its aircraft. It's completely ridiculous. It's preposterous. The second thing is that, as Dr. Filipenko has very well said, you see, the Tasmanian Sea, the Sea of Tasmania, is Australia's backyard. And Australia is the main strategic ally of the United States of America in that part of the world. And Australia is a huge continent. It controls the South Pacific and it controls the Mid-Pacific. Australia is almost a neighbor of Southeast Asia, in the north of Australia. So this is the reason why, for example, and a lot of people don't know it, the Singaporeans have Air Force bases in Australia. Because the Singaporeans, being such a small country, have Air Force bases in many different parts of the world, including Australia and other neighboring countries, for example, in Thailand, because it's the only way to guarantee the security of their country. I, again, are going to use the same argument that I used in your program the other day. When countries that are neighboring big giants that are oppressive and aggressive and expansive, as is the case of Russia with Ukraine, with the Baltic republics, with Finland, with Sweden, with Poland, when they are growing their defense budgets exponentially, it's because they feel threatened. When a country like Sweden, who was a neutral nation for decades, and that felt that neutrality was a part of their DNA, their national identity, changes this essential spirit of the country and becomes an ally of the West through NATO, it's because they feel threatened. This is exactly the case of countries like the Philippines, Thailand, Singapore, Australia. This is the reason why there is a very important program of developing the Royal Australian Navy. For example, the two aircraft carriers, the Canberra and the Adelaide, have been built by the Spanish Navantia Group, which are the sister ships of the Spanish aircraft carrier Juan Carlos I. The Americans have very rightly given the Australians the right to use nuclear technology in a transition program that will use Virginia-class attack submarines to send them to Australia until they jointly develop a new kind of nuclear-powered attack submarine with British and United States technology to protect a key ally of the West, a key ally of the United States, against the expansionism and the aggression, or the aggressivity, if you want, the aggressiveness, of the Chinese regime.
Okay, we're almost out of time, but I want to give the final word to Alexandra. Alexandra, you both have touched on quite tremendously what China is up to and the U.S. and Russia. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, what does Europe do about all of this? It wasn't at the table in Riyadh, and we don't know when they will be at the table with respect to the discussions about the Ukraine war. Final thoughts on Europe's role here.
Europe is alarmed, and it's rightfully alarmed. European leaders, including French President Emmanuel Macron and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, have condemned Trump's remarks about Ukraine and about Vladimir Putin. And there is a proposed European peacekeeping force. They've been talking about 30,000 troops in Ukraine, etc., etc. Now Europe is trying to keep up. Europe is alarmed that it's not at the table, and rightfully so. We've heard that Keith Kellogg, Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg, who's the representative of Trump on Ukraine, have said that, of course, Ukraine will be at the table later on. But now we see how Ukraine is being kept in the dark. And so probably this might mean that Europe will become stronger and more independent, not looking always at Washington, not always looking at the White House and expecting what the White House would say next. Maybe this will mean a more independent Europe that will be stronger in the face of, including the face of China and in the face of Russia, if we're talking about Russian aggression in the Baltics, first of all.
Okay, a lot to look forward to, or to be on the lookout for. Ambassador Gustavo de Aristegui from Rabat, Morocco, and Alexandra Filipenko, thank you so much for your time today, and we'll see you real soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Anita Sharma for Headlines here on A News. Please have a great day.